Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. Spain's King and Prime Minister have both paid tribute to the more than 28,000 COVID-19 victims in the country. King Felipe and Pedro Sanchez paid tribute with black masks and white roses in a state ceremony and were joined by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and the European Council President. Many of the 400 guests outside the Royal Palace in Madrid, including relatives of the victims, laid white roses on a black pedestal surrounding a bowl of burning coals. Spain is one of the worst hit countries in Europe, and after overcoming the first wave of contagions, is currently fighting small clusters of coronavirus across the country. Meanwhile, many fear South Africa's healthcare system is at breaking point. The country, which many had thought had dealt well with the pandemic, now has over 311,000 cases, the most in Africa and amongst the top 10 in the world. Twitter says a coordinated attack targeting its high-level employees was the reason for yesterday's hack of several celebrities and world leaders. US presidential candidate Joe Biden and former US President Barack Obama, along with Bill Gates and Elon Musk, were all targeted. In a scam message that began, "I am giving back to the community," multiple official accounts directed their millions of followers to deposit money into anonymous Bitcoin accounts. Twitter says all users' security has now been restored. British judges have ruled that a London schoolgirl who travelled to Syria to join Islamic State should be allowed to return back to the UK. Shamima Begum left the UK to join IS when she was just 15, but now wants to return. Her British citizenship was revoked on security grounds. The judges of the Court of Appeal said that the only way she would be able to have a fair and effective appeal of that decision would be if she was permitted to come back to the UK. Azerbaijan and Armenia have both accused each other of shelling military positions and villages, breaking their latest ceasefire agreement. Both countries' defence ministries accused the other of firing mortars from before dawn and encroaching on their territory, though there were no casualties reported. 12 Azeri and 4 Armenians, including 1 civilian, have died so far in the border clashes. Ethiopia's water minister has announced the reservoir behind the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is filling a day after talks with Sudan and Egypt on the project stalled. Sudan and Egypt both fear the $4 billion dam could lead to water shortages in their own nations. The dam, when finished, will have an installed capacity of 6,450 megawatts, more than doubling Ethiopia's existing capacity, and is the centrepiece of the country's bid to become Africa's biggest power exporter. Hundreds of people have protested in Moscow against constitutional reforms that give President Vladimir Putin another 16 years in office. Witnesses and monitoring groups reported over 100 demonstrators were arrested during the protest. Opposition activists say the vote was illegitimate and that it is time for Putin, who has ruled Russia for over 2 decades, to step down. Tunisian Prime Minister Elise Fakhfakh has stepped down, plunging the country into a political crisis as it tries to weather the economic fallout of the coronavirus. The Prime Minister presented his resignation to President Kais Saied as momentum grew in Parliament to oust the Prime Minister over an alleged conflict of interest. Experts say this will further delay urgent economic reforms and complicate efforts to handle any new surge in coronavirus cases. Floods continue to ravage South and East Asia, while in India, monsoon floods have swamped large parts of its eastern states. Local officials report this new wave of flooding have forced more than 1 million people into makeshift shelters. The floods have killed at least 10 people and injured more than 70 in the states of Assam, Bihar and Jharkhand. And in Italy, the country has seen the most rain in 100 years as the city of Palmero registered in 2 hours the quantity of rain that usually falls in a whole year. People were seen on the highways, swimming out of their cars. At least 2 people have been killed. 7 Turkish security personnel have died in a plane crash in eastern Turkey. The plane crashed on a mountain in the eastern Van province at an altitude of around 700 meters. Accident investigators are working to determine the cause of the crash. And finally, Ivory Coast has installed its first intelligent hand-washing station. Set up by a Swiss NGO, it was placed outside the Bingaville market in the capital Abidjan. The station has sensors that can tell if a water tank is running low and how many people are staying sanitized. The NGO says the data will help tell officials if people are following health and safety measures correctly. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel Studios in Lagos.